It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to The Mets Played a Baseball Game and Won edition of Rico Brogna. A little instant reaction to the very first spring training game of 2025 in which the New York Mets defeated the minor league Houston Astros on a beautiful Saturday afternoon from Clover Park in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Welcome to episode number 434 of Rico Brogna. I had all the spring training emotions, all of them. I get home, I spent the entire morning with my boys. We went to Dave & Buster's and did God knows what else. And at about 1:35, DVR is set. I take my geeky scorebook out. Screw you, Michael K. And I set up the lineup, and I was ready to go to watch a baseball game. And a couple of things before we get to some important details, some not important details, and some observations from the first spring training game of the year. Number one, if you're the Houston Astros, there is a rule. It's never enforced, but there's a rule that you're supposed to bring just a handful of starters for every spring training game. Okay, a handful. The Houston Astros did not bring one damn starter to Port St. Lucie, Florida on their little 45-minute road trip from West Palm Beach. They couldn't give us Jordan. They couldn't give us Altuve. They couldn't give us Christian Walker. They gave us nothing. Now, am I complaining? I mean, yeah, because I'd like to see Clay Holmes challenged a little bit. But the Houston Astros brought us a couple of former, they played for the Mets. We saw Ben Gamel batting third. We saw the immortal Zach Short. We hardly knew you, Zach Short. And then the rest of it was either prospects or guys that are just minor leaguers that we may never see again. So that was observation number one. Observation number two is calm down. This Met lineup does not mean anything about what Carlos Mendoza is going to do on opening day. We had a few regulars, and so you saw Lindor lead off, Soto 2, Alonso 3, Alvarez 4, McNeil 5, and then, of course, we saw some bench pieces and some guys that won't be on the team, like Rafael Ortega and Jose Azocar. And I said this a few days ago, that first spring training lineup, and really any spring training lineup, is not going to be an indicator of what Carlos Mendoza is going to do. Is it likely it's Lindor 1, Soto 2, Alonso 3? Yeah, I think if I was betting today on February 22nd, I would say that's the top three in the order. But I wouldn't look at the first spring training lineup as an example of that. But anyhow, man, it felt good. Didn't it feel good? It's been so cold out. It's been so wintry. I can't say it's been a long off season, because the reality is for us as Met fans, this is one of the shortest off seasons we've ever had. The season ended in late October, and the first spring training game is on February 22nd. So the reality is, I could tell you this has been a long, long off season, but it really hasn't. It's actually been a short off season. But sitting down and putting a baseball game on and seeing the sun drench the field and hearing Gary Cohen and Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling, hear them talk New York Mets baseball, I don't know about you, but for at least 3 or 4 innings, it felt like the middle of June. It felt like all was right with the world. And then obviously by the 4th or 5th inning, Mendy empties the bench. Most of the guys we're seeing are not big prospects. And by the 6th inning, as I'm scoring this game, and I'm writing in the name William Lugo and Yanni Hernandez and Diego Mosquera and Hayden Senger, who we may see at some point this season, that's when I started to reevaluate life. That's when I started to say, was it a good decision to score this game? But I completed it. Here it is for those watching on YouTube. My beautiful Mets Astros scorecard. All right, let's get to the game. Let's get to the moment. Because there really was one moment that I think every Met fan, even for the majority of people consuming the Rico who did not watch a spring training game, and good for you, by the way, who said, you know what? I'm not going to take 2 hours out of my life on a Saturday afternoon in February and watch this. I'll just download and listen to the Rico. And I'll hear Evan and Hoff give us a quick recap. But there is one moment from this game that you will know about. One moment from this game that will be in your memory at least for 36 hours, and then it will disappear. And that is Juan Soto's first at-bat as a New York Met. And it was very, very cool because as he comes up, I have both of my sons with me. They're playing wrestling figures at the time. My oldest son was thinking about scoring the game, but he made a wise decision not to and instead book a grudge match between wrestling figure Bobby Lashley and wrestling figure Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Worked out well. But as Soto came up, I said, hey, Jet, you want to see Juan? And he stands up, and the room is now controlled by Juan Soto. He's watching, I'm watching, my youngest is watching. And I do think that's how probably anybody who put this game on, and it's kind of in the background. Like Hoff, I would say after working a long overnight shift in which you did a great job, you're tired, you put the game on, you're on your couch, you're probably half paying attention. But when Juan Soto comes up, your attention is now consumed. Is that fair to say?
Let me put it this way. I sat up in my couch. Yes, that is 100% correct.
Sat up in his couch. First pitch to Soto, little Soto shuffle, little mini Soto shuffle. Second pitch to Juan Soto, a more fuller Soto shuffle. Third pitch to Juan, swing and a miss, which was a teaching moment because you know this, Hoff, with kids that play baseball. My son is 8. He swings and misses. He hits some balls sometimes. He's learning. I said, see, Jet, even Juan Soto swings and misses. It's a lesson. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, that's right. And then, of course, the next pitch. And Gary Cohen, I love you, Gary. He did the same thing he did with Lindor's home run in game 161. He had no freaking idea it was getting out. That's a fly ball to center. It's been a while for Gary. It's also that Florida wind. But as that ball carried into the Florida sun, you got like a tiny bit, I would say a tiny bit of a tingle. Not a full tingle, not even a half a tingle, but like a tiny tingle of, wow, what a debut. Get this in a week, and it doesn't count. Juan Soto homers in his first Met plate appearance.
Now, I got more than a tiny tingle because I got to be honest, you see, like you said, you see the at-bat, you see him woke up, you see the stat line, 40 home runs, you see the high OPS, you're like, those numbers are going to be ours this year. And then you see him again, like you said, the whole plate appearance. And even when he swung and missed, like, you kind of like, oh, wow, even big leaguers threw it. He did the same thing. He nodded. He's like, I'm paying attention now. And then sent it out of the park. Dude, I got to be honest. I stood up. I got off the couch when he hit the ball. So that to me is going to be, this season is going to be so special because of Juan Soto. But it's just, I'm getting ready for the 15-year ride of Juan Soto.
I appreciate it. I guess I am maybe underselling the tingle then. Maybe my old age. Maybe it's being 41, watching so many spring training games. Maybe that caused my tingle to just be a half a tingle. I'm not poo-pooing it completely. I'm just saying I got like maybe it wasn't even a half a tingle. Maybe it was a quarter of a tingle. Either way, it was a very cool moment. Gave the Mets a lead. Not that anybody cares about that in a spring training game. But I did start thinking about this. It's weird in baseball. So the Mets have acquired stars before. Now, certainly Juan Soto may be, in terms of age, in terms of ability and accomplishments, the greatest acquisition they've ever made. But over my lifetime as a Met fan, they've made a lot of big acquisitions. Carlos Beltran was a big acquisition. Johan Santana, big acquisition. Good to see him working out with Sean Manaea. Pedro Martinez, big acquisition. And the reason I bring that up is they all had their first spring training game. And I probably have in my spring training scorebooks games in which they made their Met debut. I do. I probably do. And I say probably because I don't remember it. I do not remember Carlos Beltran's first game in spring training as a Met. I don't remember Johan Santana's first start in spring training as a Met. I don't remember any of it. And I guess that's why my tingle is a slight one. I think there's a really good chance, and trust me, I have a long memory. I'm going to write it down in a calendar. If I come back to you in November of 2025, we're doing an off-season Rico, and out of nowhere, middle of the podcast, we're talking about Met bullpen arms, right? I'm just like, hey, Hoff, what'd Juan Soto do in his first spring training Met game? I'm curious if you'll remember. But that's a game, and we will play that game. And I can promise you, for anyone who listens to Evan and Tiki, we do a lot of long-term bets, and I write crap down, and out of nowhere, I'm like, oh, yeah, remember on June 15th, Tiki Barber said blah, 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 and here's the audio of it? So the same thing will happen, and we will test the Rico audience. Do you remember what Juan Soto did in his first spring training game? Because honestly, and I think I have a decent memory when it comes to this baseball team, I don't remember any spring training debut. I do know the feeling of excitement, though, the feeling of, geeking out and putting in my scorecard the name of a player we acquired for the first time and being like, this is awesome, baseball's back. I have that emotion every year because I miss baseball. And I also think it's a sign of the weather change too. I think that's the other aspect of preseason in MLB being more exciting than the preseasons of the other sports. Most people like the summer. So when there's a preseason game in August between the New York Giants and the New York Jets, we're excited to see football, but we're not excited about the season change. At least most people aren't. I am, but I'm a rarity. Same thing in basketball and hockey. When they play that first preseason game, as much as you love the sport and you miss seeing the Ranger uniform or the Knick uniform, you're not excited about the change in season. So I do think a part of our excitement is about the weather. But hey, great start for Juan Soto, hits the home run. He comes up a few innings later with the bases loaded, hits that ground ball to first base that turns into a fielder's choice. Either way, good to see him. The other first impression is Clay Holmes. Let's address Clay Holmes. What I was so curious about, and I usually don't consume a baseball game this way, but in the case of Clay Holmes, I wanted to, was watching a game and having the MLB app open, which is dangerous when you're behind on DVR. So I couldn't do it in this case. I had to go back in this case. And that is consume a game by seeing specifically the type of pitch that's being thrown. And the reason I find that interesting with Clay is obviously he's making that adjustment from being a relief pitcher, a good one, to a starting pitcher. We know about his sinker. We know about his sweeper. But if he's going to be a solid major league starter, we've heard about him working on a changeup. Okay, it's one thing to throw it in a bullpen session. How does it look in a game? Same thing with his cutter. So the first pitch he throws to Pedro Leon, again, give me a freaking break, and the Astros bring some real major leaguers. You saw that typical Clay Holmes sinker. I mean, like right out of the gate. We saw what made Clay Holmes a damn good reliever. He throws that hard sinker. It gets chopped right into the ground, and Clay's actually challenged to make a defensive play, and he goes out and does it. But in that first inning, you saw him, and he didn't throw a lot of pitches, use that sinker, use that sweeper, and then also use that changeup. He gets 9 outs, 1, 2, 3 first, 1, 2, 3 second, 1, 2, 3 third. He got 4 of the outs on his sinker. He got 3 of his outs on a sweeper. And yeah, he got 2 of his outs on a changeup, including, I think it was the strikeout to Zach Short. I'd have to double check that. But I know one of his strikeouts came via the changeup. So that's a good sign because honestly, for this to work, and early spring training games are, of course, not going to be a great indicator for a myriad of reasons. Your competition. B, the fact you're not facing guys multiple times. Like one of the adjustments Clay Holmes is making is not just stretching himself out to throw 85 pitches in a game or 90 pitches in a game. It's can you get the same hitter out twice? You threw that sweeper and sinker multiple times in the first at-bat. What happens in the second at-bat? Obviously, in a start like this, where he goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, he didn't face anybody twice. So we have to keep perspective on these kinds of performances. But he looked great. I mean, I'm not gonna say it doesn't matter. It's a great first start for Clay Holmes. His changeup looked effective. He also threw it against right-handers, which usually you're going to throw against lefties. I heard Mendy mention this multiple times. He mentioned this on the broadcast, but also during one of his press conferences that Clay has been trying this changeup against right-handed hitters. But a great start for Clay Holmes. He went out and threw strikes. He never fell behind anybody. He was incredibly efficient. He threw 34 pitches in 3 innings. He mixed in those pitches. I think he threw the cutter a handful of times. I got to go back and look, but it felt like the changeup was the third pitch he was throwing more often. And it was a great debut. Now you hope he feels okay. You hope there's no strain, no soreness, or serious soreness. And he comes back in 6 or 7 days and he can build off of this. There are going to be challenges for Clay Holmes. It's not, like I said, just throwing 50, 60, 70, eventually 80 pitches. It's will these pitches be effective enough to get guys out multiple times in a game? But a great first start for Clay Holmes. So Clay Holmes, awesome. Juan Soto home run, awesome. The Met lineup getting a bunch of infield hits and then taking advantage of some bad Houston defense to score 3 runs in the second inning. Who gives a crap? But there was something else from this game that I have a strong opinion on. And maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should hold off. It's only one game. But I have an opinion on ABS. And it's funny ABS, which is the what does it mean again? Automatic ball strike? Automated ball strike, right? That's the challenge system. It's a system they use in the minor leagues. It's a system that they are just trying out in spring training ballparks. Not every spring training ballpark, but yes, Clover Park, home of the Mets, is one of them, as is George M. Steinbrenner Field as well, for the Yankee fans out there. And the system, if you didn't watch this game or hear it explained, is that each team gets 2 challenges on balls and strikes. Every time you get it right, though, you don't lose a challenge, which I completely agree with. So you challenge a ball as a pitcher and they overturn it, you keep your challenge. But you can't get more than 2 wrong in a game. Once you do, challenges are gone. The challenge can only be instituted by the batter, the pitcher, and the catcher. So the manager doesn't have a chance to look at review, turn his head back, cock his head back into the locker room and say, hey, should we challenge that? Literally up to the players. So far, so good, right? We all knew these were the rules. This was our first real chance to watch it. And we witnessed a lot of challenges early in this game, including a pivotal one from Pete Alonso. And yes, I screwed up in my scorebook because my brain told me that 0-2 pitch was strike 3 called, or 1-2 pitch was strike 3 called. I'm writing the backwards K, and then I see Pete banging his head. I'm not ripping ABS because of my scorebook. I'm just explaining it took a little bit of time to get used to. So Pete challenges this 1-2 pitch. It's very quick. They have a graphic that SNY started to show us that the umpires are looking at, which will show definitively if it's a ball or strike. Did the ball go through the strike zone? Did it not? Period. Stop. The Alonso challenge was a good one. It was a ball. And it turned into a Pete Alonso walk. So you saw how challenging a 1-2 pitch, and I apologize. I'm not sure if it was 1-2 or 0-2. I think it was 1-2. But that Alonso challenge worked out because it gets overturned. He draws a walk. The Mets don't turn the inning into anything more, but obviously it could have turned an inning in a big way. So we saw that. We also saw a few Astros challenge. We saw Clay Holmes challenge, and I'm already forgetting how it worked out. All I know is it was quick, and we saw the graphic. Okay? With that said, I hate it. I do not like this. And I'm going to tell you why I don't like this. If we have definitive answers on a ball or strike with this ABS system, as opposed to putting it on the batter, the catcher, or the hitter, and also making us as fans wait. And we're getting used to that now with instant replay. Oh, the guy's ruled out, but wait, hold on. Let me see if they review it. Instead of causing that pause that we all have as fans and now instituting it with every ball and every strike, how about you just use the ABS or that system for every pitch? And if they haven't perfected it yet, if that's the worry, then don't institute it yet. Continue to make sure that system is perfect and have the umpire behind home plate with his little dash, with his little computer system, with an earpiece, and they're calling balls and strikes. Now, here's the good news. Let's say the system doesn't work. It goes down. That's why there's an umpire behind home plate. If the system goes down, we never have to know. You call ball or strike. And if you get it right most of the time, it won't be a big deal. But what I don't like about the idea of this, and we saw it in a small sample size in this one game, is it's another moment as a baseball fan to wait. Another moment to say, I'm not sure if that's strike 3. Let's give it a second. And I don't like that. I really don't. I like the idea that he's out, strike 3. We're excited or we're pissed off. But that delay now that we saw just briefly in this game, because we saw all the challenges used, especially by the Astros in the first few innings of this game. And that's a different story. If this system does become permanent, we'll talk about strategies and when to use it. And that's a whole Rico for 2026 if they institute it. But my early impression of it is no. My early impression is, sure, it's quick. Sure, they're getting it right. And that's fantastic. But then just use it for the whole game. Why are we only allowing it for a batter or pitcher to use at their discretion multiple times? Look, I'm going to watch more spring training games. And again, it's only being tested in spring training. So this is not something we are worrying about for the regular season. But I'll watch more spring training games. Hoff and I are going down to spring training. We'll watch it live and in action, especially as a fan, to see how it's kind of portrayed to us. It sounded like the umpire had a microphone and he was communicating it. So I guess I could change my opinion, but my instant reaction to the ABS system is no, thank you. Either have a full robo-ump or don't do it at all. Now, Hoff, you consumed a little bit of this game. I think you did see the Pete Alonso ABS challenge. Your impression, whether you agree with me or not, on what you witnessed today with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a couple times already this spring training that people have, that have gone to the ABS system, and I think that, there was one that the Astros went to and they got it wrong, or the hitter got it wrong. So I'm okay with it. Again, my concern is if they do go to this system, how is it going to affect, we talked about with the pitch clock, how are we going to affect big situations in the game? How is it going to look when, hey, a clock issue causes someone to score and then the game's over on a random play? We're going to get a potential ABS call in there and they're going to have to go back to replay, and it's going to just kill like the momentum from the end of that game.
And think about it. The clock thing I argued with about and said that will never happen. And I feel like I've been proven right. We've had 2 years of the pitch clock and it's never really been an issue. You almost forget the clock exists. But in a case like this, 2-ball, 2-strike count, bottom of the 9th inning, if it's called strike 3 and you have a challenge left, of course you're going to challenge it. You're going to bang your head. I mean, why wouldn't you? And vice versa. So there's always going to be that pause now. There's always going to be that wait. Now, it's not time consuming. I'm not worried about that because clearly it's not. It's more that weird hesitation for a great moment. This is guaranteed to happen. I just laid out a situation like game's on the line. Like, all right, let's go to the extreme. Game 7, Carlos Beltran against Adam Wainwright. If the Mets had a challenge left, even though it was clearly a strike, Beltran's still banging his head. Like, why wouldn't you? So that is a guarantee to happen. It will probably happen every night because if this becomes a system, my advice right off the top would be I'm saving it. Like, I'm not going to use challenges in the first or second inning unless it's a really pivotal spot. I'm always going to wait in case I need it in the 8th or 9th inning of a game. So you're setting yourself up to have to use it in a big spot. I don't love it. The good news is it's only spring training. It isn't planned to be used in the major leagues yet. I'd love to see, MLB wants to try crap out. Let me see a game with the full robo-ump. Let me see it. Because if we're about getting these calls right, then get them all right. Why are we picking the 2 that the batter, pitcher, catcher get the challenge? Like, screw that. Just give me the whole damn thing.
Right. And I got to be honest with you. Like, even if there is a strategy by like the whole team, the manager, like, guys are going to be selfish at certain moments. No one's going to be like, hey, do me a favor, quick, challenge that. There's not enough time. So players are going to take it on their own to be like, dude, I don't want to be out on this BS call. It's going to hurt them in the long run if they stick to this 2 challenges a game.
Yeah, they were going to really hate certain players. Like Pete Alonso will be killed even more. Can you believe that selfish bastard? 4th inning. We're already up 3-0 and he's challenging it. So,
hey, listen. But I'm about to do something that you love to pull. I'm not going to say the Nets, but say if this is a Knicks game and Josh Hart was at the plate. Dude, he challenged every single call. You can't have it. You can't have it.
Well, it's funny in the NBA, a sport I do love, despite my team being terrible, after every controversial call, a player will wave their finger. Now, we've also seen that in baseball, too, with the new instant replay where players are begging for a challenge on every play, and 97% of the time, no, like you're just upset for whatever reason. I like the idea of the player doing it instantly, but I just think there's a better way. But we'll see more games. I mean, the Mets basically televise every one of their home games on SNY or on Pix 11. So if you're fully engaged in the spring training, it's certainly an opportunity to kind of consume it and see what you think. As far as anything else from this game, let me look at my scorecard. Alex Ramirez, was good to see him. Had a couple of good at-bats. The Mets, remember, took him off the 40-man and actually brought him back on a minor league deal. So they said on the broadcast he's still a prospect. I'm not sure how big a prospect he is anymore. Who else did we see today? We saw Kevin Parada. Boy, he looked terrible. I know it's only 2 at-bats, but yeah. Remember when Kevin Parada was viewed as the catcher of the future, even ahead of Francisco Alvarez? He had 2 at-bats in this game and struck out both times. And we saw Hayden Singer Hayden Senger is a guy that we should keep an eye on because if there's an injury, right now, obviously the Mets have Francisco Alvarez. They've got Luis Torrens. We saw both of these guys in this game with Torrens getting 2 hits at DH and Alvarez batting cleanup behind the plate, getting that infield hit. But if there's an injury to either guy, and we certainly knock on wood that there isn't, Hayden Senger is probably the guy we see. Good defensive player. We did see him throw a guy out at second base by a mile on a little bounce throw to second. But he's probably the guy who gets the call if there's an injury behind the plate. And outside of that, we didn't see Drew Gilbert. We didn't see Jet Williams. We didn't see really any of the big position player prospects. We did see Danny Young for an inning. Danny Young has, I'd say, an okay shot to make this team, mostly because he's out of options. One of the things about roster construction is, can I keep this guy if he's not on the major league roster? Danny Young doesn't qualify anymore. Unfortunately, if Young's not on the team, the Mets are going to have to put him on waivers. We'll see if someone else picks him up. At this point, I think Danny Young's best route to making the team is if A.J. Minter is not ready. A.J. Minter, remember, is coming off that hip issue. He's not expected to pitch until the middle of March. So that's Danny Young's route. We saw Austin Warren, a guy they picked up, had a nice clean inning. Justin Hagenman, who's probably Hagenman, I think is how you pronounce it. He's probably like 9th or 10th on the starting pitching depth chart. We hear the names Tyler McGill, who's obviously still competing for a spot, Paul Blackburn, what's his name, Griffin Canning. Brandon Sproat's not ready. So if the Mets had more injuries, I don't think Brandon Sproat's making a start in the month of April. So Hagenman's a guy to keep an eye on because I think when you go further down the depth chart, and hopefully we're not going to have to worry about this, Hagenman's a guy to keep an eye on. And then we saw Rico Garcia and Trey McLaughlin. So not a lot of the future, but it was good to see baseball. And the Mets did win for what that's worth. So Mets get a victory. We watch baseball. Juan Soto hits a home run. Clay Holmes gives you 3 scoreless innings. We will give you a full Rico Brogna posted Sunday night at some point where we will get into our conversation with Carlos Mendoza from Friday. For those that missed it, Carlos Mendoza, respectfully or maybe disrespectfully, completely, utterly destroyed the idea of Pete Alonso batting second. It was done in a great way. So for all the Met fans out there who are like, Ev, your Alonso batting second idea, I don't love it. Well, guess what? We will play the audio in which Carlos Mendoza also did not like the idea of Pete batting second. But we'll get into some of the things he had to say, including, does that last backup infielder need to have experience at shortstop? Because that's a big factor when determining who makes this roster. Also, his thoughts on Francisco Lindor at captain. We'll get to a lot of your emails. So a lot going on kind of a wild card edition of the Rico that we will post Sunday night. Plus, we'll have 2 more Met games to at least consume, if you're so willing, and potentially have some thoughts on.
Just because you brought up the whole shortstop, the backup shortstop stuff, what conversation or what I saw yesterday, and it really pissed me off that Brett Baty was getting reps at shortstop. Yeah. I get pissed because I feel like, again, they're trying to force feed Brett Baty to us. Is that a realistic thing that Brett Baty's going to make the roster and be that guy, be that bench player, because he's not going to be able to be third base, shortstop, and second base?
So we've talked about this, and luckily I was able to point blank ask Mendy, and you'll hear his answer. It's not a fully direct answer, but he tries to answer it, which is, hey, does your last roster spot, because again, the outfield is set barring injuries, the 2 catchers are set, and every infielder spot is set. There's one last bench spot between Baty, between Jared Young, between Acuna, between Madrigal. Okay? Ronnie Mauricio, I don't count. No one else can play shortstop besides Lindor. So in your opinion, Carlos, do you need that player to have the ability to play shortstop? Jared Young and Brett Baty are not shortstops. Even Nick Madrigal's never played shortstop. He's learning it right now in spring training. And do you need someone who could just play an inning or 2 in a blowout, or play an inning or 2 if Francisco gets hurt? Then the next day, hey, Francisco's hurt, we need to make a roster move. So the assumption is, and you'll hear it in Carlos's explanation, is, well, I'm going to need a guy to potentially play shortstop for a few innings. What if Francisco gets hurt in the middle of a game? What if it's 18-1 in the 7th inning? So I think Brett Baty and Nick Madrigal working out at shortstop is to fill that need. I don't think Brett Baty would ever get a start at shortstop. I'm not sure Nick Madrigal would ever get a start at shortstop. But can they at least for multiple innings play the position? That's important. Otherwise, you've got nobody on your 26-man roster that can play the position. So Brett Beatty should be learning shortstop. Every single person should learn as much versatility as they can, because if you're in that pinch or if you're in that situation in a game in the middle of April, yeah, I mean, what else do you want to do? Call me up to go out and play shortstop?
I got to be honest. Again, if it's you or Brett Beatty, I may choose you.
All right. Well, you've never seen my throws. Plus, I'm a lefty, so it doesn't exactly work out well. But we'll get into what Mendy had to say. We'll read a lot of your emails, and we'll recap the first full week of spring training on the Rico Brogna episode 435 that should be posted Sunday night. We do appreciate you checking in on our New York Mets win a spring training game edition of the Rico Brogna. If you haven't subscribed to the Rico, please, thank you. Rate, subscribe, do all that stuff they tell you to do with podcasts. Thank you very much for listening to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.